money. And just like every war that's ever been fought the last few centuries, when you are a government, you borrow money from the bankers, and ultimately that's what Mayer Amschel Rothschild said. He doesn't care whether you're dealing with capitalism or communism or socialism, just give me the central bank, and I'm positioned, and I'm going to profit, and I'm going to have a tremendous amount of power. And so going back, what was the greatest threat to these world's wealthiest power people? Well, two things. One is people waking up to the truth, and number two, them coming together as a community and organizing in trade unions. And so at the beginning of the 1900s, as the Rockefeller Foundation was funding Rockefeller University laboratory pioneer in genetics, Dr. Levine, who then advanced the virology arena and the look at the genetics, and then during the late 1910 to 1930, let's say, you had an advance of what was called eugenics, which is defined as the scientific investigation of genetic differences between the races, including genetic predispositions for diseases between the races. And that was why all of the genetics and eugenics was funded, because the world's wealthiest elite had a desire to control the populations and the populace so that they could eliminate the threat of popular uprisings and revolts and labor disputes. And so this is where we now transition from 1920 to 1930 with the Rockefellers' funding of and the Carnegie's funding of the Cold Spring Harbor Labs in New York, and then the development of your first biological weapons therein, and then the testing of these agents on those that are considered less worthy of life, the mentally retarded, the institutionalized, the whole concept that Margaret Sanger was a chief propagandist. She's the grand matriarch of family planning, and called for the termination and murder of people who were genetically inferior, and that this was for the forerunner for the master race, that was Hitler's racial hygiene program in the making. And so by 1930 and 32, you had, as the rise of the Nazi Party took place and as Hitler was started to be funded by these global industrialists to bring on World War II, you had the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Eugenics, Anthropology, and Human Heredity, funded by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds et al. To advance eugenics, which again was what they called racial hygiene before Hitler got a hold of it. And then Ernst Rudin became one of the premier doctors involved at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, and that's how you got Hitler's racial hygiene program. And at the same time, you had the Rockefellers were full-fledged partners with not only Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and Dr. Ernst Rudin, but with the Bayer Corporation, and their president and CEO was Hermann Schmitz. He was the man who really you can consider the most liable or culpable for the development of the concentration camps, whereby these were labor camps and they were engaged in the development of synthetic fuel for synthetic rubber that was engaged in a contract between Rockefeller Standard Oil Company and IG Farben. That was the name of Germany's leading industrial organization that was founded by Bayer Corporation and Hermann Schmitz in partnership with Rockefeller Standard Oil. In fact, according to a U.S. federal judge that prosecuted the Rockefellers, they were cited to be enemies national. They were traitors to the United States of America. They were determined to have withheld fuel to the Allies but gave it to Hitler, and that the Schmitz held more shares of Standard Oil stock than any of the individual Rockefellers held, which tells you the power was sourcing from Europe, as it has always been. And so this is essentially the background that gives us now the understanding that where we evolved out of to come into the current genetics, which is eugenics agenda, and the most advanced biotechnologies involving the Rockefeller family, this is precisely what we're looking at with Partnership for New York City, which we've just exposed in the last month as being the heart of the beast, the heart of the biotechnology industry, the heart of the vaccine industry, the heart of what I call the petrochemical pharmaceutical cartel is in New York. And it is called the Partnership for New York City. And when one examines who those partners are, suddenly you have the whole picture just it's right in front of your eyes, and you've got to be a complete idiot not to realize we're being taken out globally. There's a depopulation agenda that's being advanced by the Population Council, which started as the Population Council of the City of New York by Rockefeller Brothers funded. Now it's funded by the United States federal government. It's funded by the leading institutions in the world, and its goal is to reduce the population by 2/3 at least. And that's what we're looking at with the threat of H1N1 recombining as all these idiots and these ignorant people line up to get their vaccinations, getting injected with a live, active, laboratory recombinant that easily mutates, easily recombines with other circulating viruses, and what is out there circulating are far more dangerous viruses than H1N1, the swine flu virus. There's H5N1 that kills 60% of the population, human population it infects. Those have been seeded. Those viruses, the experts have declared, are out there. How do we know they're out there? Because they loosed them. We had a report in February about Baxter Corporation sending H5N1 mysteriously, accidentally, in normal flu vaccines shipped to 16 laboratories in 4 different European countries. So it's out there. And what we're doing now by witnessing our idiotic brothers and sisters line up to get injected with the genocidal weapon that we call vaccination is that we are going to witness our own people creating the transmission of worse viruses and creating a greater pandemic. That is what the national declared emergency is really about. It has nothing to do with vaccine shortages. Vaccine shortages is simply shortage marketing. Look up those 2 words in a Google search. Shortage marketing. It is a ploy, and it's used when people don't want your product, so you declare, oh, it's in short supply. Suddenly you've created demand by the propaganda. And or in this case, we know people didn't want this vaccine. They're still not rejecting it. The vast majority of people don't want it. Even the medical doctors, the majority of physicians will not receive it, nor will they give it. So this is what we're looking at, and it's a very, very sad and serious picture, and I pray that I'm wrong. I wish I was wrong. But unfortunately, all the evidence indicates that what I'm sharing with you right now is the most highest likelihood and probability. And as a researcher and as a scientist, I tend to try to, abide by reality and hard, cold data, and then from that draw some sane, reasonable conclusions. And that's what I've concluded based on all the evidence.
Let me ask you something. How do they accidentally send out an H5 virus? Aren't these viruses under strict control? How do they accidentally get out?
Well, that's exactly one of the pieces of evidence, is that there's no reasonable explanation for an accidental release of H5N1 in a seasonal flu vaccine. There's no legitimate explanation. So they've held it as a, quote, accident and mystery. And Baxter, I watched earlier, there's an MSNBC segment of an interview that was conducted in a class action lawsuit against the Baxter Corporation by the people who they infected with HIV/AIDS. Don't forget Baxter, along with Bayer Corporation that I've mentioned in regard to Nazi Germany. Those 2 companies were cited in class action lawsuits for having spread the AIDS virus internationally through contaminated blood factors. Bayer's clotting factor 8, and Baxter's